Do I need to even say it at this point? Get my 6. So I came out today completely prepared to tell you a story about a really amazing 84 years young gentleman I recently met just a few days ago as of this recording, through some mutual friends. But I feel compelled to tell you somewhat of a creepy story about a 90-ish year young man I met this morning instead. I felt like telling you the story about this guy this morning while I was coming back from my bike ride. But I thought, no, this is just too crazy. Nobody would want to hear this story. Nobody would believe it. But then when I was walking around on part of the back part of our property today, trying to stay in the shade because it's 93 degrees right now. While I'm sitting here, it's 93 degrees. But I was just walking around. My beautiful bride, Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, was preparing our lunch. She made chicken adobo. It's the first time I've had it in over 3 months. You know, she was in the Philippines for 3 months visiting family. And the time she's been back, she has lost 4 pounds. But I am happy to say I found them because I have gained 4 pounds. I ate while she was gone, but not like, I mean, here's the difference. When I cook for myself or I go out and I get food, I eat until I'm full and I stop because I'm full. There's no need to eat anymore. She is such a good cook. Like the stuff she's been cooking in the almost 2 weeks that she's been back, I'll eat until I'm full. Then I take a break for like 2 or 3 minutes to let it settle. Then I keep eating more because it's so delicious. And so I'm gaining weight. So I thought, well, just exercise more. So I started doing some more stuff I hadn't touched weights in forever. So I started, but plus I've increased the lengths of my run in the mornings or the length of my mountain bike rides, trying to burn off this extra food because it's so good that I just can't stop eating it. And so that's where the story I am going to tell you, this really creepy story about a man that had to be every bit of 90, that happened this morning. But here's the thing. I was walking around up there. I was trying to stay in the shade. That I was close to where there's an old graveyard right across the property's borderline, where I know there are 3 girls that died during the Spanish influenza of 1918. Actually, in the room I use as an office upstairs in our house that was built in 1903, they're buried there. And something very strange happened in that area about a year or so. It was about a year and a half ago. We planted a man-made forest down there by the road. We have 7 rows of trees. The first row is all eastern red cedar. Second row is Leland cypress. We want to have those evergreen hedge type things in the front to completely block the view year round. And then we have 5 rows of, there's 8 rows. Then we have 5 rows of deciduous hardwoods, poplar, eastern redbud, maple, locust. And then the final row in the back that we can see from the house, it would be the first row, is looking out the windows, is a bush, not trees, but a bush called the Virginia burning bush. It's a beautiful bush. It's actually indigenous. I was talking to a landscaper recently, and he told me he can't understand why these are called Virginia burning bushes because he said they were from India. I thought they were indigenous to the state of Virginia. I need to look it back up again. They are called Virginia burning bushes. He said they're just called burning bushes. I don't know. But we planted a row of 17 there, and a couple of years ago, we had 5 of them die due to deer damage. And I was walking around that area just for like a couple of weeks saying, gosh, I need 5 more burning bushes. And those are the only plants in that entire forest that we planted that we actually purchased. The rest, we would come up here and right at the tree line where this forest meets our field, we would dig up little seedlings and saplings about 1.5 feet or 2 feet high, and we would carry them down there, and over 400 trees we did this with. It took forever. It took months originally, and then some of them wouldn't make it, some of them died, so we would replace them. It took about 3 years to really get what we wanted there to stay and live. And we would water it. We got 400 feet worth of hose. First couple of years, taking that hose down there on hot days like this in the evenings and watering everything was a lot of work, but it's really been paying off nicely. And that's just how life is. Anything worth having doesn't come easy. I mean, you know, if you want it and it's worth having, you're probably gonna have to put some effort into it. And that really is the story of the first man that I wanted to tell you about, this 84-year-old man. But then this thing happened with this 90-year-old man. And what reminded me of the 90-year-old man is when I was down there today in the shade around the graves area, I looked into the woods and I saw, okay, so we lost 5 Virginia burning bushes. Last spring, miraculously, there were just 5 Virginia burning bushes growing at the edge of this graveyard. I made a video about this. A lot of you watching this video saw that video. It's a year and a half old now. And they were the exact same height as the 12 other bushes that were still alive. So it didn't look abnormal when we stuck them in. It was still consistent. Everything was uniform. These 5 Virginia burning bushes that I'd never seen ever were just there. And so we dug them up, transferred them. So today I'm walking through there, and my wife Dearly and I just had a conversation this morning about how she wants another Althea bush, and she would like to have a purple Althea bush because we have this beautiful white Althea bush that just today got its first bloom. It's got a ton of buds, as long as I can remember, knock on wood, to spray the bush down with the deer repellent today before the sun goes down. We should have flowers all over that bush. If I don't, our free-range herd of approximately 40 deer, some of which are just hanging out right here within sight of me, laying down and sleeping, trying to stay cool, they'll eat those buds. So I'm walking up through the field, and I'm kind of talking to myself because that's what crazy people do, and they say I'm crazy. They call me Crazy Lake, whatever. I think the world's crazy, and if you're not nuts, you're not going to make it through. That's just how I see things. So I'm talking about, wow, purple Althea, I think they're like $30. I'd love to have a purple Althea, and I sure could use another Virginia burning bush because I did have one more die. But the problem was they're about 4 feet tall now, and the dead one's about 4 feet tall. Sure enough, I get over there to that graveyard, and there's not just a 4 foot tall Virginia burning bush, but there's a purple Althea bush, about 4 feet tall as well, with 2 blooms on it. I've lived here 5 years. I walk my property multiple times a day. If a stick falls from a tree somewhere on my 6 acres and I see it on the ground, I can tell you when that stick fell. That's how vigilant I am. And it's not like I'm just, I do it out of appreciation for what we have here. I love it. The place is beautiful. It's gorgeous. I never take it for granted. And I'm out here every day just thanking God for the gift. And so I noticed when a stick falls because, I was there yesterday and the stick wasn't there, so I know it's new. The point of this is there was no purple Althea bush there. Now, what's this have to do with this 90-year-old man I'm going to tell you about? It has to do with, we don't know. And you hear the craziest part? Up until I hit record, I wasn't going to tell you about this 90-ish-year-old man and this creepy thing that happened this morning until I sat down, started making this video, and happened to look directly in front of me. And here's the proof in the pudding. And the backdrop. Where's that X? There's an X back here somewhere. This is a very common spot. I'm here all the time making videos. If it's not so hot, I'll be right out there in the field at the campground. If it's too hot, I come here so I get the shade. Let me show you something. Right here within sight of me. Gosh, I'm like notorious for dropping the phone. But look. Those of you who know your plants know that this is a Virginia burning bush. Just right here in front of me. And so I took that to mean you need to tell the story about the 90-ish-year-old man, not the 84-year-old man. I will tell that story at some point. It's just an amazing individual. So here's the deal about this 90-year-old guy. So this morning, I'm out doing my, 1 hour mountain bike ride. I have these loops. There's like all these loops here where I live. I can start, go this way, end up going around the mountain, coming back this way. Most of these loops are about 8 miles long. And they take me about 45 minutes. But I was like, man, I'm gaining so much weight. gaining so much weight from all this delicious food my wife's cooking now that she's back. I need to do the longer loops. There's a couple loops that are 10 miles, 12 miles, even longer than that. They take about an hour. I did a 10-mile loop this morning that I had not done this calendar year. I've not done it in 2021. But I know I'm fit enough to do it. And 10 miles isn't far, but man, there's hills around here. Ooh, I'm in the Blue Ridge Mountains, like in them, not below them and not at the top. I'm like in the middle, halfway up the Blue Ridge Mountains. So there's nowhere I can run or bike or walk or anything around here without having these rolling hills. And it's great. It's great. It's a great workout, and it's beautiful scenery. So I'm doing this 10-mile loop, and there's this one part about halfway through the loop that is like straight uphill. I don't know the distance, but I know it takes about 4 minutes of hardcore pedaling in first gear on my 21-speed mountain bike. I have a Diamondback, and at the last 30 seconds to a minute, I'm standing. I'm up out of the saddle. This is hard. This is very hard, and those of you who cycle know what I'm talking about. You get to the top, and then it starts to go down, and then it levels out. Well, you never want to stop right at the top of a hill. You need to start cooling down a little bit, bringing your heart rate down if you do want to stop. And I never stop, so I usually just coast, and I'll drink water as I'm coasting. But I stopped this time towards the end of that flat portion of the road before it dropped again, because there's an area that always caught my interest, and there was something very different about it today. Now, what always caught my interest about it was this big, it looked like a stone, like a big stone foundation. A lot of times, I'm in Virginia, you'll find these old stone walls. Some of them go back to the Revolutionary War. Now, those are very, very old, and they're very, very rare, but it's easy to find stone walls here that were built by local farmers more than a century ago. As they're removing the field stones, as they're clearing the fields to plant crops, they'll pile the rocks up, and then they'll use them to make walls. But this was different. I never knew what this was. There was just like a field there with a sharp drop off over on the other side. And I'd never seen the other side because it's not my property. It's personal property, private property. But this stone, it was in a circular form, and it was big. I mean, it took up the whole field. It was like maybe 30 yards from, what do you call that? Straight through the middle of the circle. It's not circumference. What's that, diameter? The diameter from one point to the other side would be about 50 feet. But in the middle, there was a bunch of stones piled up as well, all varying heights. It looked like perhaps it used to be some sort of structure that had fallen. And it always caught my attention because it just seemed so out of place. It seemed so odd. So today I go up there, first time this year, and it's gone. Not only is it gone, but the land has been leveled. Even though it was flat, it's been excavated, and they're starting to build a house there. So I stopped. I'm looking, I'm drinking water, and I hear this voice say, I told them they ought not have done that, but they won't listen to me. And I turn around, and there's this old man there, and he was real. He didn't vanish. When we were finished talking, I left, and I looked back just before I dropped over the hill there. He was still there. So it wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a phantom. It wasn't the hermit from the haunted homestead up here. Real person. And so I look back, I acknowledge him, I say, hey, good morning, how are you? And I was right there on the edge of the road. He must have been there, and I just missed him because I was focused on getting up that hill. I was really pumping. He says, I told them they ought not do that, but they ain't from around here, so they didn't want to listen to me, and they went on and did it anyway. And I was like, did what? He said, build a house. He says, they ain't going to make it. They ain't going to make it. He says, you come back here a year after they start living in there, they won't be living in there. They won't make it. And I said, well, why is that? He goes, oh, I could tell you, but I can tell you ain't from around here either. You probably wouldn't believe me either. I said, well, I live just a few miles back down the road here. He says, you grow up there? I said, no. He says, well, you ain't from around here. I mean, and that's common. That's a common mindset in any rural area. I said, okay, well, I'm not from around here, but I'm curious to hear the story behind what you're saying anyway. So he proceeded to tell me the story, and it had to do with his grandfather. Now you figure if this guy's 90, he would have been born around 1930. So his grandfather would have been probably born around 1890, maybe 1900 at the late. Is that right? 1900, then the next generation would be 1920. Now, his grandfather would have been born 1880, 1890. So the story he told me was that once upon a time, long time ago, all that land was owned by, and this is going way back, centuries, was owned by a very piously religious individual who killed a witch there where that house was being built. Said he killed a witch, hanged her. And before he hanged her, and this is going back to the witch trial days, and you think Salem, you think Massachusetts, those things were taking place anywhere. That's what happens when societies get caught up in any sort of craze or any sort of rush. It takes place everywhere. Now, there's always going to be the epicenter that's most known for it, but it's going on everywhere. So during those days, a witch was hanged, and her final words were, "The devil will have his home here." And then they, of course, hit the mule or whatever, and that was the end of her. Poor woman, she wasn't a witch. We know these things. And maybe she was, but she's probably harmless. And you notice how quiet it just got? So anyway, the old pious, ultra-religious guy that was going around hanging these women for whatever reason under the concept that they were witches. Those were some, it's like one of the reasons they stopped with this institutionalization of people in mental asylums is because if you wanted to get rid of your wife because you had a lover, you had a girlfriend, you're some rich cat, you're 50, you got a 50-year-old wife, and you fall for the 25-year-old house servant or whatever, you just say your wife's crazy and you have her institutionalized. Guess what? Boom, she's out of the way, and you got your 25-year-old lover there. And then, of course, behind your back, she's taking your wealth and supporting her 25-year-old husband you don't know about. Back during the witch trial days, you could accuse a woman of witchcraft, say she's a witch. And you guys know that part of the history. It's a very disgusting part of the history, of our history. But so the guy said, well, the devil isn't going to build a house here if I make a tower, if I put something here so a house can't be built. And so he built like a rook, like on the side of a castle, that take up the whole field where the witch was hanged. And he made it a couple levels high at first. But he kind of got carried away with it, and the story goes that he lost his mind, and he kept building it higher and higher and higher, almost like the Tower of Babel. And he built it high enough to a point to where on the other side there's a straight drop off. There's like a rock quarry down there. Eventually the man, out of sheer insanity, they say, dove to his demise, his unfortunate demise, into the quarry. However, when they recovered the body, it had been eaten partially, considerably, by what looked like pigs, based upon the teeth mark. No one in the area had pigs. Nobody was raising pigs. And there are no wild pigs in this part of the world. They're further south. If you keep going south, I know from Georgia on, and maybe in the Carolinas, all right, so for some reason my phone just stopped recording in mid-sentence. My storage isn't full, and I have a full charge, so I have reason to believe we may or may not be alone right now. I think someone or something's creeping up on us to try to hear this story. So keep your eyes open back here. Keep getting my six, as it were. All right, there's no wild pigs here, not to belabor that point. So after that, no one would live in this tower. There were rooms in the towers. He would build upwards. But now, getting to this 90-something-year-old man's grandfather's story, the 90-year-old man said when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him a story about something that happened when his grandfather was like 25. So it was probably circa 1900. He said that the property had been bought and sold, of course, throughout the years. Someone bought the property and decided to live in the tower. And it was someone who wasn't from around here. I guess we're the ones that just don't listen. We're the ones that just don't leave well enough alone. Those of us who just aren't from around here. Yeah, keep your eyes on it. All right, so this guy, he was a single man, like middle-aged, no family, which would have looked a bit peculiar back then, as you know. There's something going on with the light around here. This is odd. I'm going to take that to mean they want me to just keep telling the story, so I will. And now the noise is coming back. How odd is this? The cicadas. So, the old man's grandfather was approached one day by this 50-ish-year-old man, and he said, I would like to hire you for a special job, because the old man's grandfather lived down the hill from this tower, this rook. Not quite a castle. We'll call it a tower. He says, can I hire you for a very special job? Well, the guy, of course, was always, he wanted the money. He needed the money. He was willing to work for the money. He said, sure. So he goes to the tower with the guy. And the door was locked from the outside. So he unlocks the door. They go in. They open the door. They walk in, and there's sand scattered all over just inside the door of this tower. And in the sand, there are hoof prints that look like pig hoofs, but much, much bigger. And the old man's grandfather asked the guy that owned the place at the time, he says, do you have pigs living in here? He says, no, I don't, and that's just it. He said, in this sand I put out just this morning before I left home, locked the house from the outside. There were no tracks in the sand when I left. There is something, there is an entity in this house. I have heard it, I have felt it, it has brushed up against. It has brushed up against me. I don't know what it is, but I'm living in terror of this entity. He reaches into his pocket and he pulls out a handgun and he hands it to him and he says, do you know how to use one of these? And the guy, of course, says, yeah, of course. And he says, I have a whistle. And he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a whistle. He says, here's your job. He says, I know that if I blow this whistle loudly from any window, you're out front, you'll be able to hear it from where you are. He says, I want you to take this handgun and I want you to come up prepared to kill a creature, a beast, a something, I know not what, that may be trying to kill me. And the guy said, okay. And he put him up on like some kind of weekly salary where he just gave him something weekly to kind of always be at the ready. So the old man's grandfather claimed in his story that one night he heard the whistle. So he went running up to the property. He went into the tower and he couldn't find the man that lived there. He was nowhere to be found. He went home, of course. And then the next day, the body of the man who lived in the tower was found over the cliff. Very similarly to the original owner of the property, the man who built the tower centuries before. It appeared as if, out of insanity or a desire to take his own life, he dove from the top of the tower over the mountainside into a rock quarry below to his own demise, his unfortunate demise. But there were all of these markings as if a good portion of his body had been eaten by what appeared to be pigs. By this time, they were quite a bit more advanced in forensics, and it was determined that those bite marks, the eating that took place, didn't take place down there in that rock quarry hundreds of feet below the top of the tower. These wounds are actually what killed the man. It's as if something or a group of some things had eaten the man alive, and when they were finished, they just threw the remains off the top of the tower into the rock quarry below. Wasn't expecting to hear a tale like that while I was out on a 10-mile bike ride this morning. The old man that told it to me just leaned back up against the tree he'd been leaning on when I pulled up, and he says, "Come back and see if they're here a year after they move in." I said, "All right, will do. You have a good day." And I took off, pedaling down the road. It's 40 or 50 yards away, getting ready to drop down out of sight, and I looked back and he was still there. See you for more next time.